Hey there, everyone. This is Samuel Johnson, and welcome back to the MCU Perspectives. And today, we're going to be taking a look at the 21st film to be released as part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Captain Marvel. And since this is another solo film, I should probably get into my personal history with Captain Marvel prior to seeing this movie. And admittedly, when it comes to Captain Marvel, my knowledge was kind of minimal, to put it nicely. I was aware of Captain Marvel and the surrounding mythos, but I only knew so much about Captain Marvel, and honestly, for the longest time and even nowadays, when I think of Captain Marvel, I think of the DC variant who's now called Shazam. I think of the guy who was a kid who transformed into like the magical equivalent of Superman whenever he yelled out a word. For the longest time, for me, that was Captain Marvel. Marvel's Captain Marvel, I honest to God had no interest in, and even when even when there was more developments with them, I just thought to myself, okay, whatever. I'm still following the DC one. For me, that was Captain Marvel. Marvel's variant, I couldn't care about, and honestly, it was mostly because they both shared the name that I didn't really want to learn about both of them. As such, the only exposure I had to Captain Marvel was just through some offhand stuff, a character here and there using the name, or even the titular character of this movie, Carol Danvers. I didn't learn about Captain Marvel's backstory till later, and even then, it was kind of offhand Captain Marvel. And even then, it was more offhand, and I think it was kind of after I saw this movie that I got the full backstory. I had been exposed like maybe once, and that was like through review to the original Captain Marvel, but otherwise, I was mostly just familiar with Captain Marvel via proxies and Carol Danvers when she was Miss Marvel, and even then, that was like in crossover stories, like in Dark Avengers or House of M. Those were where that was my only exposure, and I did read a little bit of Miss Marvel at the time prior to seeing this movie, the one with Kamala Khan. So I was aware of that, and I was aware enough of the comics to know about the recent developments of Carol Danvers. So I was somewhat familiar with that, and when they set up Captain Marvel at the end of Avengers, when they set up that they were going to be bringing Captain Marvel into the MCU at the end of Infinity War, I was familiar enough with the characters that when I saw the symbol, I knew, oh, cool, Carol Danvers is going to be in the next movie, and so I thought that was cool. That was cool, but otherwise, I only knew so much about Captain Marvel, and as the films kept getting progressively closer, I did want to know a bit more about Captain Marvel, and after seeing the film, I did learn a little bit more. I do own a few more comics that revolve around Captain Marvel. I actually own the Death of Captain Marvel original graphic novel. It's a bit old and beat up, but it actually kind of tells how the first Captain. But it's pretty much what it says on the tin, how the original Captain Marvel died, and after a while, and I do own a miniseries called I think it's called the origin of Captain Marvel, which kind of tells a slightly a retcon history of Carol a retcon history of Carol's backstory, which is one of the primary reasons why I haven't fully read it. And I have mentioned again that I have read a bit of the Kamala Khan Marvel. I have read the first volume. It's pretty good. I think I want to read more, but otherwise it's all I don't. But otherwise, that's all I've been exposed to, aside from like maybe a crossover in the Spider-Verse comic. But but even then, most of that stuff came about after I saw this movie. Prior to it, I only knew so much, and as such, I only knew I only knew so much. I was aware, however, of Carol Danvers' backstory. I was aware that in the comics she was a test pilot who'd been exposed to some weird energy that turned her into a Kree-human hybrid, and that originally she was pretty much just meant to be a female counterpart to the original Captain Marvel called Miss Marvel. She wouldn't take up the mantle for a while in the comics, and up until she took it, the title was kind of passed around to a few people here and there. Eventually, until she eventually took up the mantle herself. So I was aware of that. So I was at least aware of that. And so, only knowing that much about the character, I knew that when they made this movie that she would probably be the primary focus, which honestly I didn't have an issue with, since they kind of did the same thing with Ant-Man. as they use the person who's currently Ant-Man in the case of him, in the case of that, Scott Lang, to most likely to familiarize any audiences that were introduced through him to the movies. And likewise, I thought they would probably do the same thing with Captain Marvel, as if they probably brought in the original and new readers who just started with Carol saw that, they'd be like, well, who the hell's that guy? This is Captain Marvel. I don't know that guy. So it makes sense why they would do it with Carol. However, when the film was getting closer and then eventually came out, reactions to it were kind of across the board. Like, for example, I was still going to Metropolitan State, and one of my fellow students, I won't say who, worked in a theater, and he wound up seeing the film for himself, and he said it was boring and didn't recommend it. People, and then on the internet, there was just a complete divide over people who actually want of reactions to this movie. Some people thought it was just fantastic, awesome, great superhero fun, while the other half thought it was boring, dull, and that Carol Danvers was just a bad main character, and that Brie Larson was not fit for the role. That introducing this character was pandering to the social justice warrior audience, or other people said, oh no, it's empowering. She's just out there being a superhero, doing some cool stuff. Some people saying she's a great representation of a female superhero. Others say, well, we got all these other female superheroes. Blah blah blah. It was just so much noise. Like, so many people were objecting to this movie's existence while others are praising its existence. And honestly, as I kept hearing both sides of the story, all I thought, look at this and thought, I don't want to hear. I just looked at this and thought, I'm seeing this movie no matter what any of you guys say. You know that, right? I mean, I didn't say it to anyone out loud. I probably said it to my classmate, but I probably said I'm probably going to see the movie anyway. Because, as I said in a previous vlog, at this point, they had me by ankles and are shaking the money out of my pocket, so I was going to see the movie either way. I already missed Ant-Man and the Wasp. I wasn't going to miss this one. So there was abso-friggin-lutely no way that I was just going to walk away from this movie. I was going to go see it, and, well, earlier this year I did exactly that. Me and my mom went to go see the film, and, what did I think of it? Well, let's get to my long-ass spoilerific plot summary. In terms of when this film takes place, it takes place about a couple decades before the present day of the MCU, from what we know. Hold on a second. I wanted to shut off my phone. I didn't want any more. Well, not really. I silenced the phone. I don't want any more notification noises interrupting this or something. Anyway, as I was saying, it takes place about a couple decades before the present day in the MCU. In this case, the 90s, specifically 1995, if what we heard here in the movie is true. Our main character is a woman that we at first is introduced as Verse or Veers. Who's a member of the race of aliens known as the Kree, who we have previously seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Ronan the Accuser, the treaty between them and Xandar, apparently Yondu having a few bounties on his head from the Kree, yada yada yada. Pretty much, this is actually allowing us to see, we're now actually getting a chance to see their home planet of Hala, which admittedly looks like a pretty cool place. It's super technologically advanced. It's got all these great things, and on top of that, Veers is apparently one of their warriors, or as she says, they're all warriors. Pretty much, her trainer is this man by the name of Jan Rog. I think his name is. I think that's it. So that's how I'm gonna say it. Who she pretty much has like a father-daughter relationship with. Like she goes to him when she's having troubles. They spar together, they joke together, they work side by side. He sticks up for her. It's just kind of a strange father-son relationship. Father-daughter relationship, sorry. However, Veers apparently suffers from strange dreams, as up till 6 years prior, she seems to have no memories of who she is. The only memories that she retains is of a woman with a gun in a battlefield, holding up a gun to some stranger in silhouette. That's all she can remember, and even then it's foggy. She doesn't remember anything. It's just she only knows so much, and it just keeps constantly getting to her. On top of that, she's one of the few Kree warrior. She's apparently one of the few Kree warriors that has these strange abilities that seem to be given to her through this strange little chip imbued in her neck, which allows her to pretty much just shoot energy blasts out of her hands while also giving her kind of a boost in her own power. On top of that, though, all this thing has to do. This thing also regulates the powers as if it's shut off, her powers are cut off completely. As such, she is still training, but the images are getting to her to the point where she actually goes to talk to the Great Intelligence, the leader of the Kree, who's just all-powerful AI that whenever someone goes to talk to it, it kind of connects with their mind and takes on the form of whoever they have a connection with. And in the case of Virus, it's the old woman from her memories, though even she doesn't know the connection. And pretty much just everyone's telling her the same thing. Don't let your emotions get to you. Focus on your duty to the Kree Empire. Yada yada yada. As such, things kind of start picking up. As such, after she talks to the Great Intelligence, she's sent on a mission with Yon-Rogg and a few other Kree warriors to be sent to some planet that I didn't bother memorizing the name of, to kind of meet up with a Kree. Oh yeah, sorry, one little thing. Actually, I'll get into that in a minute. To kind of meet up with one of their Kree spies, so to speak. He's apparently collected some information that they need to see on the Kree's enemy, the Skrulls. Pretty much what the Skrulls are these shape-shifting aliens that the Kree say are a terrorist race. And how they operate is that they go from planet to planet that the Kree occupy, shape-shift into the planet and its inhabitants, and then just slowly take over the planet through subterfuge. As such, the Kree are pretty much at war with the Skrulls, and whoever this ambassador is, and whoever this spy is, he has information that could prove useful to them. As such, Veers, Yon-Rogg, and the other Kree get onto a ship and end up traveling to the planet. Also, this is Michael Minor note. Most of the Kree are blue, while Veers and Yon-Rogg are pink. This is actually a thing with the Kree. Most of them are blue, while there are a pink minority that resemble humans. Just throwing that out there because that's a thing. So let's forget that and move on. Anyway, so they land on the planet, and of course the group just splits up. They see it's pretty much in ruins, with the Kree saying that the Skrulls the one that did this, and they do see a few people and they do see a few scavengers living there that they don't see as Skrulls. But they have to also be careful, as one lady goes up to sets up a sniper shot, while the rest of them also ultimately split up and go into the ruins. Ruins with Veers going first, while Yon-Rogg and two others provide backup. However, the scavengers eventually kind of pull in, start to surround them, and before the sniper lady, I don't remember her name, sorry to say, can open fire on them, her partner comes up and says, no, they're nobody, they're just scavengers looking for food, until she sees through her scope her partner is right there among the crowd, making her realize that the guy talking to her is a Skrull. As such, she shoots him and just before the scavengers can attack the other Kree, she shoots at them and they realize that it's an ambush. In the meantime, though, Veers goes into the ruins and meets up with a contact who even gives the ID number and everything. But as they're talking, Yon-Rogg is able to contact Veers and tells her that this is all a trap. Which at that point the guy ends up zapping her, which paralyzes her, revealing that he is in fact a Skrull. In this case, he's kind of a big name among the Skrulls named Telos, who it turns out actually set this whole thing up because he wanted Veers. Which is just kind of lucky that she's the one that came, because what if the Kree sent another squadron after them and just decided to leave Veers back on Hala? I kind of would have screwed up their whole plan there, but whatever. Either way, Telos knocks her out, and from what we can gather, it looks like that the Skrulls managed to escape with Veers. However, the next thing that Verse experiences, when Verse quote unquote awakens, she finds that she starts experiencing strange memories, so to speak, as we see her when it looks like inside an air hangar as she's going out and meeting with a co-pilot. We see her as a little kid racing before crashing and burning, while a man, presumably her father, starts chewing her out. We see her training in the military and falling on her ass, and on top, see her as a kid at the beach. Just kind of all these images in her head, just all these various images to the point until eventually she meets up with the woman from her dreams, who is, okay, I'm going to pause the vlog for a second, I gotta check my notes. Her name is Dr. Lawson, who seems to be kind of a superior officer on the Air Force that minor spoiler there, that Veers had a relationship with. However, and apparently that's what an apparent. However, but the thing is, throughout all memory, she's been hearing the voices of Telos and some of his men, who apparently have been rearranging that, and now that they've located Lawson, they're trying to find. Apparently, they're trying to locate something, and they eventually pull up an image of Veers in a plane, in a fighter plane, and as they're crashing, and before she ejects, and they're just trying to get some coordinates. However, they can get a clear image of her. Dog's gonna jump on the bed in a minute. Go, go. Ugh. Get a clear image though. Carol wakes up. Damn it! I keep calling her by her real name. Sorry. I keep calling her by her real name. Sorry. I know. I've already revealed the name when I talked about the history, but whatever. I'm gonna keep trying to call her Veer. Sorry. But she ends up waking up, and upon waking, she manages to break from her shackles and starts demanding that Telos tell her exactly what those images were and how he put them in her head. She responds with, "They were already in there. He was just looking for information." She of course thinks he's full of it, but he does say that they're after a light speed engine that Dr. Lawson was working on. As such, Carol manages to escape, and after fighting through more Skrull hordes and eventually breaking out of her shackles, eventually getting her boots back, she pretty much caused enough damage to the ship that causes a few of the crew, including Telos, to escape. She manages to get into an escape pod. She managed to get into an escape pod herself and get away, but in the process, Telos wound up shooting the controls, and as a result of this, when the escape pod flies to Earth, it burns up in the atmosphere and falls apart. As such, Carol ends up crashing down to Earth and ends up in the middle of a blockbuster video. Of course, she's a little bit curious about what's going on, but knowing what she knows now, she needs to try and contact their superior, specifically Jan Rog. As such, she gets out of the blockbuster and manages to find a security officer who takes the whole woman falling out of the sky into a blockbuster rather well, as she immediately wants to know where she can find communication device, to which she points her towards a Radio Shack next door. And she pretty much takes some of the technology from the Radio Shack, including a Game Boy, which she cannibalizes, which makes my inner gamer rage a little. And she managed to hook it up to a telephone and hooks it up to her communicator so she can contact Jan Rog. She then explains what the Skrulls were doing and how they were able to how they captured her and so forth. And they pretty much just tell her to lay low while they follow her signal and eventually come get her. That's actually part of the reason why she landed on Earth. Why Veers landed on Earth, as the Skrulls were only able to get the information that it was on Earth. Sorry, someone's shooting off a gun, and my dog is a pansy. Hold on a sec. I'm gonna hold Xander for a while. He's being a pansy, so I need to comfort him whether he likes it or not. Anyway, as I was saying, how Veers wants to try and they tell her that she needs to stay put. Okay, my dog actually wanted to play. Something I wouldn't be against, except I'm in the middle of a vlog. And now he's hiding under the bed. So, I'm a little annoyed. But anyway, Jan Rog tells Verse not to follow up on what she learned, and once again, the Skrulls were able to at least get some information out of her head that wherever they want to go, it's on Earth, but unfortunately, they still don't know the specific location, which is why they were trying to get the coordinates to what she saw out of her mind. As such, she's now on Earth, and she knows that they're after a lightspeed engine because that's what Telos said. But unfortunately, they don't know where it is, so she wants to look into it, even though Jan Rog says, "Just stay put, and we'll come get you." Something that Varys isn't exactly okay with. However, when she eventually crashed, it turns out that the security guard actually called the authorities. And who should show up but S.H.I.E.L.D.? Because, again, this is the time when S.H.I.E.L.D. is still a thing. And the agents, of course, that show up are Phil Coulson and a younger Nick Fury. And yeah, it is nice seeing Phil Coulson again, even if he's only in the film for like only little bit parts here and there. But as for Fury, for one thing, he has more hair, and two, he has both eyes. personality is still about the same, as he doesn't take any crap from anybody, and he immediately goes up to Carol and just starts questioning her, grilling her for any information. She, of course, just kind of takes it all in stride and does explain the whole situation to him with the Skrulls and everything. And while he isn't exactly inclined to believe her, while he isn't exactly inclined to disbelieve her since she came crashing out of the sky, he also isn't inclined to. He doesn't also inclined. Sorry, he isn't inclined to disbelieve her. He's also not inclined to believe her since he doesn't know her. Sorry. Gotta take care of my dog again. Okay, I'm a little annoyed with my dog. He's kind of in I want to be a little dink mode right now, and he wants me to play with him. And I know a lot of people will probably say, well, go play with your dog, you can do this later. Well, unfortunately, unlike some other YouTubers out there, I can't edit any of this since I'm doing it all in one take. And if I want to change anything, I just have to I gotta redo it. And I gotta be sure that it's early enough in the vlog that I can do it. So, any interruptions are stuck. It sucks, but it's what happens. So, sorry. But with that distraction out of the way, and I think Xander's going downstairs now. Anyway, anyways, I was saying, Veers confronts Nick Fury, who, like I said, isn't in a position to disbelieve her, but he's not really in a position to believe her either. She's a woman that crashed out of the sky into a blockbuster. He's just here to do his job. As such, after she tells him about the Skrulls and their invasion and everything, he pretty much just says, well, you're under arrest. As such, he has one of his men pull up cuffs until a surfer ends up pulling out a laser and shoots at them. Yeah, it turns out that Telos and what's left of his crew managed to land on the planet, and they shaped it into the locals to try and blend in as best as they could. As such, once Veers sees them, I swear to God, this is the last time. I swear to God, that is the last interruption. Bar him having to use the bathroom, I am not stopping this for anything. Anyway, as I was saying, Veers ends up going after the Skrull that shot at them because the Skrulls are blending in with the locals, and so Fury and Coulson end up getting into their car and chasing after her as she chases after the Skrull. Eventually, the chase leads her to chasing onto a subway, and of course, upon entering the subway, it shapeshifts again to blend right in. As such, Veers is being skeptical of all the passengers as she keeps eyeing them and trying to ensure that they're who they are. They make sure that they're not Skrulls. And this is where we also get our Stan Lee cameo as he's on the train, actually, as he's practicing his lines for Mallrats. And something of note I should probably mention, when the movie started with the Marvel Studios logo and instead of showing images from previous Marvel films, they showed all these clips of Stan from throughout the MCU and his cameos. It's nice and heartfelt, and it's a good way of honoring his memory, and I like it. So, but either way, as she's going along, she happens to notice an old lady, and the thing is, she saw this exact old lady getting off the train when she got here. As such, she knows that this is the Kree, and it kind of leads to a slightly humorous scene as she just decks the old lady, and they just start getting into a fight right there on the train. And I'm sorry, it's actually kind of funny, just because you see this old lady actually putting up a decent fight against Veers. And it's silly and stupid, and of course, the other train patrons start try stopping Veers when it looks like she's fighting an old lady, but the old lady Skrull actually puts up a decent defense and manages to escape off the train, and Veers manages to shake off the other patrons to go after the Skrull, who just shaped into another guy and jumps on top of the train. Veers ends up chasing after him, and he eventually escapes by jumping back into the train, and unfortunately Veers loses him once again. On top of this, when Fury was still chasing after Veers, he ends up getting a call from Coulson, who turns out was still the blockbuster collecting clues. Meaning that the guy sitting with him right now is not actually Agent Phil Coulson, it's a Skrull in disguise. And the instant that gets out, it just immediately attacks them, and as Fury tries resisting, they get into a car car crash, which unfortunately kills the Skrull. As such, Fury takes the Skrull body back to S.H.I.E.L.D. so they can examine it and look it over. And so when he pretty much shows this to his superior, he says that while he wasn't exactly believing of Virus' story before, at this point I should probably no, I have to keep it up until the actual until they actually get a confirmation. He saw the Skrull, he didn't believe Virus' story, but at this point upon seeing this guy who impersonated Coulson, he's willing to believe anything. As such, his superior tells him that he shouldn't continue his investigation, but he needs to continue it alone, as since the Skrulls are shapeshifters, any one of their agents could be compromised. As such, Fury takes this to heart and goes off to do the investigation. Only it turns out the superior is actually Telos in disguise, who most likely gave the order to keep the word of the Skrulls on Earth a secret, as he honors his fallen comrade. In the meantime, Virus actually managed to pick up something from the Skrull she was chasing and subsequently lost on the train as it blended right in with the rest of everybody. But it seems to be that what the data but it seems to be I suppose you could say something that contains all the data on the memories they pulled from her when they had her locked up. As she's able to put it into a scanner she has on her suit, which shows her some of the images before it unfortunately burns out. And some of the images include Pegasus and the name of a bar and just a few other images, but not much else, before it eventually becomes useless. As such, Virus starts trying to look into research on this stuff, including the name of the bar, and manages to find where it's located. And on top of that, she ends up stealing some clothes from a clothing store, and when she sees a nearby biker, she ends up stealing his bike. And fun fact, this actually was an altered scene. In the original scene, she actually beat up the guy when he was just kind of being a jerk, and she beat him up and stole not only his bike, but his clothes. I'm glad they changed it for the movie. It's because stealing the bike is just a dick move, but the other one was just kind of was pushing it. And as such, she takes the motorcycle and tries to go to where the bar is. Hold on a second. I think if he doesn't need to use the bathroom, I'm just going to bring him in here, and he's just going to have to deal. Well, now he's officially here with me. Anyway, so Virus ends up going to the bar, and upon getting there, it brings back some memories. Her just kind of goofing off in the bar, playing on games, just kind of being a goofball and just having fun. Of course, the bar is mostly empty now, save for like a bar attendant. And while she does ask him about a picture as it relates to an image she saw, something concerning Pegasus, the guy only doesn't know anything. But Fury ends up coming in and actually and wants to have a talk with Virus. As such, they get into a nice little conversation as they both have to try and confirm that the other is not a Skrull. As they can't use DNA, as when a Skrull copies someone, it copies their genetic signature perfectly, so if this was a Skrull impersonating Nick, it'd be a perfect impersonation. However, whenever a Skrull transforms into someone, the only memories they can assimilate are the most recent, so long-term memories and other stuff is off the books for them. As such, Nick ends up revealing several bits of personal information, including a weird thing that Virus ends up talking him into by saying he can't eat toast unless it's cut diagonally. And Virus is able to confirm identity by shooting one of her energy blasts at the jukebox. As such, they decide that they're going to work together and try and find anything they can about Pegasus and the professor that Carol knew, the old lady. I forgot her name. I'm sorry to say. As such, Fury's able to get his connection to find out where Project Pegasus is, and so he's able to get in by even saying his name is Nicholas something Fury. But of course he confirms to Carol that everyone pretty much calls him Fury, even his loved ones. And as such they get in, and when Fury wants to know anything about, and so when Fury and Virus ask about anything related to, end up asking about Project Pegasus, the guy in charge just kind of locks him in a room, locks him in a waiting room, and especially when they ask about the professor in charge, about the professor that Carol knew, and yeah. It's obvious that whatever's going on, they don't want anyone to know about it, to the point where even someone like Nick Fury, who's supposed to have high clearance because he's part of S.H.I.E.L.D., is not someone they want to talk to. As such, Fury kind of pulls out this. God dang it! I forgot what it was. God, hold on a second. Sorry, I tend to forget words sometimes. Fury pulls out his pager and calls her backup. As he uses a bit of tape to pull off a fingerprint from the general that brought them in, so that they can trick the fingerprint scanner and get him and Veers out of there. As they continue going forward and eventually reach because they need to go to the records room. It's Wendy Lawson, by the way. Sorry. And upon looking and eventually they find the files on Project Pegasus and Wendy Lawson. And it turns out that part of the reason why Pegasus is so hush hush is because it was a unilateral failure. As Wendy Lawson apparently lost her life in the first test flight of it, which was supposed to be of the warp drive of the lightspeed engine that the Skrulls were looking for, but again it crashed, and apparently it claimed her life as well as the life of another pilot, and that was about 6 years ago. However, upon looking through the notes, it turns out that Dr. Wendy Lawson was actually a Kree, as her notes are written in the Kree language, which Veers is able to fully recognize. However, things are still getting a bit more trippy, as when she looks through Lawson's files, she finds a picture of Wendy on the field, along with what looks like Veers near a plane, same with her memories. So things are just getting even more twisted, and she wants to know exactly what's going on. As such, Fury's backup arrives and he goes to meet them while Veers tries contacting Jan Rog, I think his name is. Dang it, I forgot his name too. As she contacts Jan Rog and explains what she found. As such, Jan Rog reveals that Dr. Wendy Lawson was, yes, indeed a Kree named Mar-Vell. Remember this. I'm going to go off on a tangent about it later. But pretty much, Mar-Vell was apparently experimenting with lightspeed drive and something called and a strange energy and some sort of strange energy that could have turned the tide of the war. Which is part of what's going on. However, when Veers tries telling Jan Rog about her experiences with this stuff, about her experiences and how she thinks she had a life on this planet, Jan Rog just says that that's just the Skrulls getting in her head and that she just needs to push past all that, which she wants to do, but at the same time she's having trouble with that, accepting that. She has trouble kind of swallowing that. But in the meantime, the Shield backup ends up arriving, and so Fury ends up working with the guy. Fury ends up meeting with his superior, and so Fury ends up meeting with the superior officer who goes to meet with him, who says he wants to go talk to Carol Veers personally. I'm sorry, I keep getting the names mixed up. I'm gonna call her. Don't worry, I'll call her by her real name when eventually her full backstory is revealed. So. But when he goes to see it, when they're going down, he ends up calling Fury by his first name, which tips Fury off that he's a Skrull. As such, he sends him to the wrong floor while Fury goes to try and find Veers. But when the guy gets to the wrong floor and realizes that realizes he's been had, he realizes that Fury and Carol. I'm just gonna finally call her Carol. I keep getting the names mixed up because that's how I identify her, as Carol. He realizes that they're working together, and so he tells the other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents that they're working together, and that they need to bring him in dead or alive. Again, also remember this. As such, Carol, when she hears all the commotion, she tries leaving, and she hears the other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, and she realizes that Fury ratted her out. But when she hears the dead or alive thing, she decides that she's going to go back to help him. As such, as Fury is hiding from the agents, he eventually runs into Telos, he eventually runs into Telos again because he was the one hiding the Superior, and they get into a one-sided fight where Telos is obviously winning until Carol shows up and blasts him. As such, they end up escaping to the flight hangar with Carol confiscating Fury's pager because she clearly thinks he can't be trusted with it, and so they manage to steal a ship and escape. Though they manage to pick up a little co-pilot, a little stowaway. In this case, a cat that belonged to Wendy Lawson, aka Mar-Vell, named Goose. That despite the 6 years seems to still be on the base. and for some reason was actually somehow got into the ship. As such, they realized that to get further along in whatever Lawson was doing, they need to go back. They need to find other people who might have known. They might have known about the flight that happened 6 years prior. And Carol is especially more concerned about this because because she was found on Hala or injured and without any memories 6 years prior. So there could easily be a connection, and with that photo, she's now more sure than ever that she did have a life on Earth. Before she did have a life on Earth at some point. As such, they are able to track down the other lady, and they're able to track down another lady in the file, a lady named Maria Rambo. And when they eventually track her down, she actually recognizes Carol, saying that they were once friends. Even her daughter goes up to her and says that she's her Auntie Carol, especially since we had a memory earlier of them playing together. But of course, Carol is still a strange. They're still strangers to Carol, and they do quickly bring them up to the speed on what's going on and what's happening. And Maria, of course, is just kind of having a trouble taking all of this in, especially since, well, Carol was like one of her best friends in the Air Force, and now to learn that she's actually been alive for 6 years and now has superpowers and is apparently and has no memory of her at all. It's a little too much. It's a little much for her to handle. However, they are still able to get to common ground, and so they are able to talk about what happened that day when when Lawson and Carol went out to fly. It turns out that Lawson was kind of a little jittery that day and said she needed to fly the plane because people were in danger and she had to save lives. Carol said that it was too dangerous and so she would fly it, and as a result, both of them ended up getting into the plane. They both were flying the plane together. However, as things go on, eventually though, Maria's daughter ends up showing Carol a bunch of all these old photos of Carol, just further confirming her life on this world. But that all gets interrupted when a neighbor stops by. Carol believes that it's Telos in disguise and just kind of gives them the cold shoulder. But after Maria politely tells them that they kind of need to talk another time, Telos is right behind them, having snuck in, and to try and dissuade them from doing anything to harm him, he has one of his agents outside impersonating Maria with her daughter. So yeah, they're kind of at a stalemate. However, Telos says that he's not here to fight. He wants the coordinates in her brain, and after seeing everything that she is and confirming who she is, he knows that yeah, she is special, and she definitely has what they want, and so he wants to cooperate. As it turns out that his people actually managed to go to the crash site from where the Pegasus plane crashed, and they're able to get the black box, which has a recording of Carol's voice on it, which they want her to listen to. She is initially reluctant, but they do kind of put a compromise in it. But they do manage to get into a talking, and they do eventually concede. Though to further ensure that Carol has some upper hand, apparently it turns out that Telos is actually afraid of the cat Goose, saying that it's some dangerous creature whose name I don't remember. But either way, all they have to do is hold up to him, and he just starts freaking out, saying that it's not a cat, it's this dangerous beast. As such, they pretty much pull out the CD from the black box and place it on a recording on a computer, so Carol can listen to it, and it finally does stir the memories of that day in her mind. It turns out that Carol and Lawson, aka Marvell, flew up, and the intent was that Marvell apparently had a spaceship, a lab somewhere in orbit, and they were flying out to it when they were suddenly attacked. Marvell, of course, is just like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have gotten you into this, but they do try and maneuver the ship as much as they can, but eventually it gets kind of too much, it was too much for them, and they crashed. Carol managed to get out of it okay, but Marvell was unfortunately injured, which ultimately revealed to Carol that she was an alien, especially when she started bleeding blue blood and, well, a spaceship shot them out of the sky. As such, Marvell reveals her origins, who what her real name is, etc., and how she fought in the war for half of her life, and how she's trying to make amends. As such, she says that the last thing she wants to do is that she needs to destroy the energy core before the bad guys get a hold of it until she's suddenly shot dead. And it turns out the person in the silhouette, the one that Carol had been seeing in her memories, was actually Jan Rog. It turns out he was the one that shot them down, and he is there for the energy core. However, and so he tries questioning Carol about where it is, Carol tries playing dumb, saying nothing, and so he's willing to shoot her. But before she can actually say anything, she says, "Wait, hold up. If you mean that energy core?" And yeah, the energy core is actually in the ship. Before they can grab it, Carol takes the gun that Mar-Vell had and shoots the ship, which shoots the energy core, causing an explosion that wound up having all the energy be absorbed into her, which in reality is the source of her powers and not that little chip on her neck. As it turns out, that chip is actually a power dampener that the Kree put on her to control her powers. As such, with the energy absorbed into her, she got knocked out, and so Jan Rog and this other lady who was the sniper earlier were actually now realize that has all the energy and that they need to, and that if they want all the power, they're going to need to take Carol with them. And the Veer's name came from them finding what was left of her dog tag, as it had been broken apart, with half of it staying on Earth, and that was all that was found in the site, and the other half being kept with them, the verse part. So they took the name Carol Danvers, took off Carol Dan, and just kept Veers, and so that's where that came from. As such, Carol takes all of this. When Carol hears all this, she kind of has a mini freak out, as now she has no idea what to believe, as the life that she thought she had was in fact a lie, and the people she thought she could trust were in fact monsters. But how on top of that, though, and to make it even worse, and on top of that, it's her view of the Skrulls is now being changed. It turns out that the reason why they were going after Carol was because Mar-Vell was actually one of their allies. The reason they were wanting to try and get the coordinates out of her mind is because they're trying to locate a lab which should contain something that could help them find a new home. As the reason why the Kree and the Skrulls are at war is because the Kree tried conquering their planet, and the Skrulls didn't want to, and the Skrulls didn't concede, and so the Kree sicked their accusers on them. And yes, Ronan is in the movie. He's probably the head honcho of the accusers, and just devastated their planet. As such, the Skrulls have pretty much been bopping around the galaxy, doing whatever they can, doing whatever they can to stay alive, hiding, blending in, etc. But the Kree have been looking for them everywhere, and so the Kree have been looking for them everywhere. In fact, the ruins that Carol and the rest of the Kree were investigating earlier was what was left of a planet that the Skrull was what was left of the planet after the Kree pretty much annihilated it, leaving all the big structures in ruin. As such, Carol is still having an existential crisis about her identity, but Maria managed to get her out of it by telling her that she's Carol, she's stubborn, she's a pain in the ass, but she's fun, she's one of the most powerful people she knew, even before she had her superpowers. And so they just kind of hug, and they just continue with their plan. As such, they're able to take the coordinates that they got from Carol's memory, and it turns out that the coordinates weren't for someplace on Earth. It was actually coordinates for space, as Mar-Vell's lab was located up there, which Telos starts chewing his science guy out for, because apparently he never figured that out in all their studies. But at the same time, Carol still sent out a signal to Jan Rog, so they are still going to come to try and find her, and she knows that if she's not here when they arrive, they're going to figure out what's going on. As such, they realize they're going to need to meet them in full. They realize they have to go right away. As such, Carol, Fury, and Telos end up taking Maria's plane that Maria had, augmenting it, while also talking Maria into coming with them. With her parents coming by to watch her daughter. However, before they go, the daughter and Carol end up having a talk, as Carol calls her by the nickname that she usually called her by, Hat Memory, now back in the surface. And Carol's now back in her Kree jumpsuit, but she doesn't exactly want to wear the colors of the people that kidnapped her and brainwashed her into working for them. As such, she and the daughter end up going through several designs before eventually settling on the red, blue, and gold outfit, which I actually really like. It's a really dynamic and really kick-ass outfit. It's super fun it really captures the whole really dynamic. It's really cool to look at, and I think it's just awesome. Although there was one neon one that I especially liked, but that was my personal bias. It looked gaudy, but god dang it, I like neon Sumi. As such, the four managed to get into the plane and ends up flying into space. With Fury taking Goose with them because, well, he still doesn't fully trust the Skrulls, and they're still afraid of this cat, so he's going to keep it around. However, When Yangrog arrives and tracks down the coordinates, he does eventually catch up. He does eventually find the science guy impersonating Carol. He tries asking a bunch of personal questions to try and confirm it's her. And while the guy is able to get 2 out of 3 right, the third one, yeah, that one's the big that one's the big clincher, as he shoots the guy and causes him to shapeshift back. And he starts asking where Carol is, but he says that it's like you're too late. And so Youngrog is able to put together that Carol has found out the truth about the truth. As such, he kills the guy, and he ends up contacting Ronan. As when Ronan learned about what happened to the Kree, he was planning on going to Earth and just raising it, but Youngrog convinced him that he could probably do something. But now that he knows that Carol's back, that Carol now knows exactly what happened, he says that he wants Ronan here ASAP. As such, Carol and Co. manage to get up into space, and they eventually do manage to find Mar-Vell's lab, which has actually been cloaked this whole time, and so they go on board. They go inside to try and find what Telos is looking for, and inside they find the Tesseract. Now, originally I didn't understand how Mar-Vell could have the Tesseract, as canonically the last person who had it at this point was Howard Stark, who went on to form S.H.I.E.L.D., but I think it's implied that Project Pegasus was technically being funded by S.H.I.E.L.D., so I think it would make sense that Mar-Vell would have access to would be able to have access to the Tesseract. But I don't know but the reason Fury may have been able to get in was because maybe that S.H.I.E.L.D. has higher clearance than other government agencies, so I don't know how Mar-Vell got it. For all I know, maybe she stole it. I don't really know. Either way, this is the big energy source that they were looking for. And yes, this also means that Carol's powers also came from the Tesseract, showing that the Infinity Stones, no matter what their intended purpose are, can give you whatever random superpowers you want. They can power death weapons that can annihilate people. The Mind Stone can give give twins different superpowers. And for Carol, it gives her energy-based powers So yeah, Infinity Stones can do a lot. But yeah. So they take the Tesseract and put it in a lunchbox nearby. However, they notice that there's a hot coffee cup nearby, and considering that Mar-Vell died 6 years ago, that means that there's someone still on the base. As such, Telos lets out this weird call around the ship, and it turns out that Mar-Vell was also keeping a small little hot nest of Skrulls living here, including all Telos' family, which was the real reason he wanted to come to the ship. He wanted to be reunited with his family. However, this reunion is cut short as the Kree soldiers end up attacking the ship and start rounding up all the Skrulls, including Skrulls also separating out Fury, Maria, and Goose. As such, Carol tries fighting back with her powers, but because with the inhibitor chip, they're able to shut them off. And pretty much in hand-to-hand combat, she and Yarn, they pretty much, because they established in like the beginning of the movie, Yarmrog is actually a superior fighter to Carol, and he's able to beat her very easily, especially with his enhanced weapons. As such, with all that in mind, they pretty much just get all the Skrulls rounded up, and their intent is just to launch them out into space while they keep the Tesseract for themselves, as that's the energy. And so they hook up Carol to the Great Intelligence again, and so now that she's able to get context with the image of Mar-Vell, the Great Intelligence is able to put more of a picture to the face, adapting more of Mar-Vell's mannerisms, kind of being more friendly and more outgoing to Carol, even though the Great Intelligence makes it clear, you're ours and we're not letting you go. Carol tries fighting back and wanting to actually says that she's not going to bow to them, that you've lied to me all my life, but the Great Intelligence says, who were you before us? And so as Carol tries when Carol tries hitting the Great Intelligence, her fist actually goes through her face, and she's thrown an image of all of her memories of her just kind of being constantly knocked around, falling down, and just being belittled. And it wasn't until she got her powers and the Kree took her in that they finally made something of her. That they're what made her who she is right now. That it's thanks to them that she is who she is. And if not for them, she'd just be a weak little human. However, despite all that, Carol actually does get a burst of determination, as in all those memories, we see that despite all the time she's been knocked down, she also gets right back up, and she keeps trying to power through it. And so, with these people, with the lives on the line, she starts getting more of a determination, and despite the limiter still being active, she starts charging her powers, and in the real world, her hands start lighting up more and more, and they're wondering what the heck's going on in there. And so as her powers start letting up, it actually starts affecting the power in the ship. The point where the cells start failing, and Fury's cuffs actually break, allowing him and Fury and Maria's cuffs to break and allowing them to escape and even free Goose, who it turns out actually is an alien. As he actually, we'll see that later. Sorry, I'll get to that. But yeah, he's also an alien he's also an alien. But yeah, he actually is an alien with these big giant tentacles in his mouth that can consume anything. But Carol pretty much is able to actually power through the Great Intelligence, and finally and to the point where, and even just tells the Great Intelligence, "I've been fighting with one hand tied behind my back this whole time. You want to know what happens when I'm free, when I can? Do you want to know what happens when I let go?" And so she's actually able to power through the Great Intelligence, but she's actually able to override the mental link and break out of the world and just shatter her chains. At which point, yeah, the rest of the movie is her curb stomping the Kree, as every time they come after her, she's just able to knock them aside with her powers. And so as Fury and Maria are fighting through more Kree soldiers, she comes up to them and they see that she's all glowy, and and in the middle of all that, she was able to grab the Tesseract and she gave it to Fury. However, she tells them, "I want you to take the Tesseract, but not the lunchbox." As such, Goose ends up eating the Tesseract, leaving her the lunchbox, which is when they learn that Goose is actually an alien, not like a harmless, cute little kitty. But at the same time, however, Carol actually does have a plan in mind, as she goes to confront Yang-Rong and the other Kree soldiers and just keep fighting them off while saying that she has the Tesseract in the lunchbox. As such, Fury and Maria continue making their way through the ship, eventually running into the Skrulls as they're being led to the airlock. However, unfortunately, the weapons are the weapon that Maria picked up isn't. However, yeah, because she picked up a gun, isn't working, and Goose isn't actually, for some reason, isn't going after the Kree soldier that's leading the Skrulls. Instead, going up to it and actually kind of rubbing up against his leg. However, as these Kree soldiers are leading Fury, Maria, and the other Skrulls to the airlock where they can just eject them out, the guy mentioned something that Kree said to him earlier about an operation that Kree had with his superior. And so Fury is able to realize that this is Telos in disguise. As such, when they get to the airlock and the ships, Telos tells his wife to cover their daughter's eyes, and he shoots down the other Kree soldiers, allowing all the Skrulls to get into the ship, while Fury and Maria get into the driver's seat and take it off and fly off. However, Yanrog sends one of their soldiers to fly after them, and we get a nice little air fight that eventually ends with the Kree lady ship being blown up. But in the meantime, Carol ends up actually fighting with Yanrog, and Carol ends up getting into a fight with Yanrog, and the fight eventually ends. And while he's putting up more of a fight than others because of his weapons, Carol is still clearly outpowering him, and until eventually he ends up retreating as well as the ship as the ship ends up blowing up, and he ends up getting to an escape pod. Escape pod. Oh yeah, forgot to mention that. It turns out that's what happened with the other. I'm sorry, I'm getting all these details confused. I'm sorry to say, but yeah, he ended up escaping, and Carol chasing after him, even jumping onto the side of his ship. But eventually he managed to knock her off, and she started falling to the earth, only for her to activate her powers and learn that she can fly. And yeah, with that in mind, she's able to knock Yanrog's ship aside while allowing Fury and Maria to take down the other ship. But at this point, Ronan is arriving with all of his accusers, and so they start shooting off their missiles to try and raise the surface of Earth. Carol ends up flying up and ends up blasting through their missiles, which Ronan sends out more fighters to take her out, and once again, she just walks right through all of them with little to no effort. And to further exemplify her power, she just uses up energy that shakes the ship, making Ronan finally say, "We need to retreat, and we'll come back for the weapon," which in turn he means Carol. As such, Carol goes back down to Earth and confronts Yanrog, and Yanrog tries to goad her into a one-on-one fight with no weapons or special powers, to which Carol just responds with blasting him, which I think is just hilarious, because even when I saw that scene, I just thought to myself, why should she fight you hand on hand? She has nothing to. She doesn't like you anymore, so what does she have to prove to you? It's real. And yeah, that's exactly. And so yeah, it was kind of funny. As such, she brings him back to the ship. She brings him back to his ship and tells him, "I have a message for you. Tell the Great Intelligence that I'm coming to end it." And even though he knows that he might end up facing punishment for failure, Yamrong is just sent off into space. As such, with all these developments, Fury just kind of cut. And we also, one more thing. This is where we learn where Fury lost his eye. It turns out that he was cuddling with Goose, and Goose, being a cat, up scratching his eye very badly. And that's the reason why he has an eye patch. It's dumb. But anyway, yeah. With the victory against the Kree, Telos, his wife, and their kid are now just kind of hanging out at Maria's house a lot, where they all just talking and having fun and just kind of having a nice little celebration victory party. However, they don't know exactly where they're going to go now with the Kree. They're not going. They don't know. Telos doesn't know exactly where they're going to go now because of what happened, but Carol says that she'll help them find a new world to try and finish Mar-Vell's work. And so after the party is over and Fury's washing dishes, Carol ends up handing him back his pager, now augmented, telling him that it's now linked to her and it can pretty much get a range over 2 galaxies, but she doesn't want him calling unless it's an emergency, which means I guess the invasion of New York wasn't an emergency, but whatever. They had Avengers. And in Infinity War, half the world was dying, so whatever. Maybe that's total emergency. I don't know. Either way, they part on good terms as well. Carol gets her jacket back from Maria's daughter, who had kept it for all these years. And so the last we see of Carol in the film is her going into space and leading the Kree off to try and find a new home for them. However, as it's the last scene in the film for the film is we see Fury in his office as he's trying to write up an initiative starts trying to write up an initiative because what if the Earth encounters even bigger threats than before? They're not going to be able to and some they're probably not as friendly as the Kree. They're probably not like the Kree, unfriendlies, and as such they can't just rely on Carol to come pull their butts out of the fire and all these things. In these situations, and so he wants to try and set up a team to combat that, which leads to Fury starting the Avengers Initiative, actually naming it after Carol's flying nickname. But of course, we still have our post credit scenes, as our actual post credit scene is just Goose jumping on Fury's desk and puking out the Tesseract. But the one that's important is the mid credit scene, which actually ties back into Infinity War. As it turns out that after half the world was killed, the Avengers have been tallying the dead, and it just keeps going higher and higher. On top, however, they were able to find Nick Fury's pager after he sent out the message to Carol, and the pager has now gone silent. They don't know why it's caused it. They don't know what caused it or why, but they want to try and get it back up because whoever Fury was calling, they need to get the signal out again. As such, however, before they can even jump start that, Carol ends up appearing behind them and demands to know where the heck Fury is. So, on the whole, what did I think of Captain Marvel? Honestly, it's alright. Yeah, that's really all I can say about the film. I think it's just an alright movie. It's not amazing, it's not great, but it's alright. Like, for starters, I actually like Brie Larson as Carol Danvers. I'm not even gonna lie. Every single scene that she's in the movie, it looks like she's having fun with the role, and it shows in her. And it shows whenever she's flying around doing superhero stuff or just kind of hanging out with people. It looks like she's having fun, getting into the role, trying to actually trying to get into the whole superhero thing. And when she actually is allowed to go all out with her powers, it's amazing and just really freaking fun, and it looks like she's just having a hell of a time with what she's given. It's just really nice. On top of that, there are still some interesting aspects. The film does have its own bits of interesting. The film does have its own little bits of interesting stuff to it. For example, it is nice seeing the younger versions of Fury and Coulson, and I like the dynamic that Fury and Carol have with each other, as they're both soldiers, but Carol's kind of a smart ass, while Fury's kind of the dead ringer, though they both can give as much as they can take. So that's kind of nice. And I actually do kind of like the whole mystery with Carol's backstory. Like, if you were aware of Carol Danvers in the comics, then you know that she's human. You know that at the end of the day, she's not really Kree, and that she's just kind of a Kree hybrid. But at the same time, I do kind of like seeing the discovery of the identity, as little by little we see her memories just start coming back. And of course, she has absolutely no idea what the hell they are. For 6 years, she's believed that she was actually a Kree, and now all that identity is being challenged as these new memories are coming to light, which in turn starts to cause her to question her identity just little by little. And you can see that she is trying to reject it, as she does want to believe that it's a Kree lie, that these are images that are placed in her head. But you can definitely see some little cracks in the seams here and there, as she's starting to realize that she maybe wasn't a Kree, and that maybe she did live on Earth at least once in her life. So that's actually a little nice. Nice. And on top, and of course, the top and a big thing that this movie has is the action. I love the action. It really is nice, and it's still fun to watch. And the action of the big to the small, I think, is really well executed. I when Carol like when we the fight the in person fight scenes, I think, are really nice and really nice and close and fast paced, that still they keep your attention getting your attention. However, when the film's allowed to get bigger and start going for the bigger effects, especially when Carol is finally gets the limiter off her and is allowed to cut loose of their powers, I think it is so fun to watch. And I think that's on top of that, I think that's one of the most kick-ass moments in the movie, as she pretty much just tells these people who have been holding her down her whole life, "Up yours! I'm going to kick your asses. I'm gonna kick your collective asses," as she just starts blasting them all to hell and back. It is just super fun to watch. And on top of that, Brie Larson isn't the only one that turns in a good performance. We still got Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury, and I think he still does a fantastic job of what he's given. It's nice seeing Coulson back, and he's still he's still charming to watch, even if he is just in the movie for a little bit. But however, I will also give credit for the actor they got to play Telos. I love this guy, as he's able to kind of sway from just kind of subdued and creepy to actually kind of heartwarming and kind of jokey. It's actually really nice, and I like seeing that. And the film does have some minor bits of humor here and there, some good bits of humor here and there that I think really helps it work. But there are still a number of aspects that this movie has that kind of keep it from being great in my eyes, and just keep it in the all right category. And for starters, it's Carol Danvers. It's Carol Danvers herself. Now, again, I'm not gonna bash Brie Larson here. Despite what I've heard about her and build up to the film, I wasn't gonna judge her about anything wasn't gonna judge her on anything. I was just a moviegoer, and I was just gonna judge her on the performance. And for her credit, she does turn in a good performance, and like I said, it's clear she's having a lot of fun with what she's given, and she tries to do and she definitely does a good job with it. But with that being said, I think Carol Danvers could have been done better in this movie. Remember back in my Incredible Hulk vlog where I said that Edward Norton's Bruce Banner was kind of a bland main character that you only knew so much, and that wasn't really much for a personal stake in his affairs? I think Carol is a kind of more improved version of that, and though obviously given more. For starters, unlike Edward Norton's Bruce Banner, Brie Larson's Carol Danvers does get some character to work with. We see that she's supposed to be, from what we briefly see of her, she's kind of a snarky bastard, which I admit I found endearing to a degree, as I'm a fan of snarky characters who just kind of speak their mind and like to mess with people. And to be fair, they do that well enough. They do that well enough in some cases in the movie. As Carol's able to give some good jokes, she's able to do a quick jab at someone. Even when she and Fury are talking, she tricks him into revealing something embarrassing just because she wants to mock him. And to be fair, she can be friendly and nice and easygoing. But the problem is, her snark is most of her character. And I know they were trying to do more with her character through the film. Like, they were trying to set her up as kind of a friendly, amiable person who's kind of a joker, who likes to mess with people and kind of be a dick sometimes, while at the same time just generally being a good person that at the end of the day definitely has a good heart and wants to do good. But the most we see of that character is like only in snippets. Like in the flashbacks, we see it briefly as we see Carol hanging out with Maria and her daughter and just her having fun and playing around. We see it briefly when she's at the bar kind of goofing off, chugging, singing karaoke, and playing video games. But, and even in the present day, we see kind of that behavior come out when she steals the guy's bike because the guy was just kind of being rude to her. Which admittedly it was a dickhead move, but I found a little humorous because of just how much of a dick move it was. But unfortunately, those are only a few minor moments. The flashbacks, and even then the flashbacks kind of feel somewhat disconnected because thanks to whatever the Kree did to her to take away her memories, though you can easily make the argument that was a side effect of her getting the powers, whatever they did to her, it kind of is like a different person. Well, while Veers contains some of Carol Danvers' original persona, some of Carol's original persona, like with the snarkiness, we don't really see enough of that joking personality. We don't really see her being a lot. We don't really see her do that beyond. We don't. Much of her character is defined by her being snarky and militaristic, while also trying to uncover the secrets of her past. Which don't get me wrong, it is nice seeing her just slowly unravel the mystery of who she was and what happened to her, to ultimately land her in the Kree Empire and even get her superpowers. So that's nice to know. But for a character, most of what she has is her snarkiness. And while I did still find that somewhat endearing and fun and fun to watch, because again I do like snarky characters, unfortunately, for actually building a character that only is so much. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still a lot. It's still better than what we got with Edward Norton's Bruce Banner, as that Bruce Banner had barely any defining character traits about him, just kind of being a blank slate beyond he's a scientist, and that's kind of it. Or he's with Betty Ross. That's another thing, but that still doesn't really give us a lot to work with. But at least with Carol, there is still something there. So I am still somewhat invested in. So I do still like her more than Edward Norton's Bruce Banner. There is still something there, and on top of that, she definitely shows more emotion than Edward Norton's Bruce Banner, as she can be happy, as she actually can be fun, happy, jovial, and actually kind of nice when she wants to be. She definitely still earns more points than that. So yeah, I do understand why people call her bland, that she didn't have a character, and I do somewhat agree with that complaint. I do somewhat agree with that complaint, but I still think that there is still something there. But the problem is that it just needed more. It just needed to add more to it, and that was ultimately its biggest problem. My second issue, I think, would kind of need to be with the pacing to a degree. Like, I think the biggest thing would be how I think this film kind of suffers a similar flaw that the first Thor movie suffered with. Before we're able to even get a grasp of Carol's character, we immediately get thrown into the action. And while the action is supposed to lead to the inciting incident that leads to everything, it ultimately doesn't feel like much of it kind of feels like that the movie is trying to. She just had to swim by throwing us in the deep end, as we immediately get to action before we're given time to actually fully know Carol Danvers. So yeah, that's kind of a problem, and it does kind of disrupt the pacing. And another thing another minor complaint, and also another complaint that I have this film, Carol. Like, one thing comes back to Carol again. It's the snark too, unfortunately. I know I just said I like the snark, but there were times when that could be annoying, and I didn't think it really added to anything Well, it does kind of show how confident she can be in battle, and that does kind of help define her character arc as we see her start to develop more from that. As we see her start developing more from her trying to impress people to her eventually kind of not needing to her just being able to just stand on her own without them. I'm okay. I liked that. But other times, it felt really annoying, and it felt like she was just being a shit for the sake of being a shit. Which I don't like. Like, there are limits to how snarky someone can be, and there are times when it can be called for, and there were a few times when it wasn't called for in the movie, unfortunately. And as such, while I was okay with her snarky personality, there were times when I felt like, okay, it's like, okay, you can stop that now. Which I don't like saying, but that's true. And another thing I didn't like, admittedly, the big reveal with the Skrulls. Again, I will give credit to the actor who played Telos. He does a good job with what he's given, and he definitely does when he does command a good weight with the role. The problem is, though, before the reveal that the Skrulls are actually victims of the Kree, they were mostly played off as villains. They were willing to get innocent lives caught in the crossfire. They willingly fought. They willingly fought. They played dirty. When Telos was in a position of power and learned that Fury was actually siding with Carol, he ordered the agents to bring them both in, dead or alive, even though he was trying to get to Carol's head. So I don't understand that argument. And he was just kind of acting more villainous, taunting the heroes, taunting Carol and Fury when he got the chance, kind of making just kind of little arrogant gestures like, you should be kind to your neighbors, you never know when you'll need a cup of sugar, or, well, you're leaving so soon, we barely just begun. Just general stuff like that gave you kind of a villain vibe from him. And if they were going to go with a villain, it would have been okay. For the most part, it would have definitely added some grandeur to it, especially since he did have some humorous moments here and there, especially when he landed on Earth and one of his underlings transformed into someone he transformed into, and he said, "I'm sorry, this one's already taken." But when we get the reveal, I'm sorry to say that it feels a little out of left field, and that kind of blindsides you to a degree. Especially since they seem to be building the Skrulls up as villains. Especially since in other Marvel properties, the Skrulls are kind of the villains. They're invaders. They travel from world to world, take over, and then take over the planet through subterfuge and sabotage. So they're usually the villains. So you kind of expect them to be villains. And while I can understand, and you could make the argument that maybe he was driven to do some dirty things because of the war with the Kree Empire, but there's a difference between doing those things and kind of slipping into the villain role. And I'm sorry to say that Telos, up until the reveal, was fitting more into the villain role. He was acting more maniacal, more kind of under the radar, more kind of subtle and definitely subdued while also mocking and arrogant. And it did it well, but then when the reveal came that he was actually a good guy, it kind of makes those prior actions and even some of the stuff he did while he was hiding out feel wrong. Like when he had Carol, I can understand why he had to capture her. He was part of the Kree Empire, and maybe you could say it was arrogance when he was, and maybe you could say it was arrogance because he thought that she was just that he thought that she was just another Kree warrior. But as things started to unfold, I feel like he should have started opening up more, saying that we just needed information. It's like you don't understand. I can understand him doing dirtier things, like I could see him still sabotaging Carol's ship to try and keep Carol's pod to keep her from leaving, and still trying to hide among the populace, or even trying to capture Fury when you realize that Fury was siding with Carol. But by that same token, it doesn't feel right when the reveal does come. It doesn't feel. It feels a little out of left field, is what I'm saying. With the Kree. I kind of feel similar way, kind of not, because we kind of saw them in other films, and from the vibe we got from them, they were kind of assholes. And even the original Captain Marvel's backstory involved him betraying the Kree Empire, so that was a thing. But I also think the Skrulls were one of Captain Marvel's enemies, but don't quote me on that. I think they were, though. Because I know one of the Skrulls came to him when he was dying and actually gave him an award for how valiant he was. I don't know. That's me going off on a slight tangent there. So I don't know. That part I'm not fully okay with. I guess you could say I'm mixed about it. Like it didn't feel like there was proper build up to it, and then when they actually did do it, it felt like out of left field. But for what we do get, when we actually do see the struggling Skrull civilians and people, it does make you realize just how bad things are, and it does make you feel sorry for them. And even when Talos is revealed to be a good guy, he's amiable, he's fun, he's cool to be around, and he definitely still has and the actor who plays him still definitely brings a weight to the performance that I think makes it that I still think makes it entertaining and worth watching. But I think one last thing that kind of got under my skin personally was this film's interpretation of Marvel. And I've talked before and I've kind of hinted at this before in my other vlogs, how I'm okay with how they've changed other characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like making the Ancient One into a woman, or Flash Thompson into an indie from a bully jock to just my parents richer than your parents type of bully who's not even white. I think he's an Indian. Don't quote me on that. Don't quote me on that. But like I was okay with certain changes to the MCU until Marvel. Now, I've kind of now, admittedly, it's not the fact that Marvel is an old lady that I have a problem with. It's the fact that Marvel is not the original Captain Marvel. Like, let me explain. The original comics had Marvel be a Kree soldier who was sent to Earth to kind of scope it out for invasion. He saw the beauty of Earth and didn't want to destroy it, and so he turned on the Empire and became Earth's protector. He became Captain Marvel because his name was Marvel, and so it fell under the native tongue and started being called Marvel. Marvel, hence the name Captain Marvel. And however, but the Marvel we're shown here in the movie, we don't get any indication that at any point prior to this film was that she was like that. And again, which kind of bugs me a little. It's like a personal pet peeve of mine. Because when you have a legacy character, when the character that you're showcasing is in the film that's your main character is taking up a superhero mantle that was previously held by someone else, I feel like you should acknowledge that about that hero's existence, which is something which the MCU has done before, like in Ant-Man. While Scott Lang was the main character of that, they did acknowledge that Hank Pym was the original Ant-Man and that he did wear the suit before. Same with Hope and Janet. Hope may have been the new Wasp, but Janet still came first before her. So it's nice to have that little acknowledgement and have the original be brought up. And while Carol's backstory is still tied in with Marvel, I think it feel like that it's kind of undermining Marvel's backstory, Marvel's role a little. And I know again, and I'm not again. This isn't me going nuts about the casting, even though I just talked about that. So insult me by hypocrisy all you want. I mean, unload on me if you want. I don't care. I don't care. Well, okay, I care a little. Otherwise, I wouldn't be inviting it. I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic. But at the very least, I would have been more okay with it if they had acknowledged the Captain Marvel backstory. Like, they do make it clear that Marvel was in fact a Kree traitor. That she realized that the Kree Empire were a bunch of despots and so started working to undermine them by working on this lightspeed engine with the Tesseract acting as the energy core. With the Tesseract acting as the energy core and even harboring the Skrulls and wanting to help them find a new home. But honestly, I would have liked some acknowledgement of how that happened. Like, even in Ant-Man, we saw, like, little snippets of Hank wearing the Ant-Man suit and kind of doing stuff when he was Ant-Man. And I honestly would have liked it if we got some acknowledgement for that with Marvel. Like, maybe we see her old uniform lying around, and maybe that's red and blue, and they say that when she was younger, she was a warrior, and then she did fight on the Skrull side before she eventually got older and started wanting to fight them in other ways, which led to the energy core. That I think could have been I think that would have been cool, allowing Carol to still carry on the mantle allowing Carol to still be a hero while also acknowledging who came before her. I think that would have been nice. I just kind of, but the film unfortunately kind of. It reduces Marvel to more of a mentor role. And there's nothing wrong with a mentor role. Hank Pym was in the mentor role in Ant-Man. But in the end of the day, I feel like that the film kind of undermines Marvel for the sake of Carol. And while kind of slightly fridging her to kind of help contribute to... Sorry, I'm keeping an eye on my dog. He's just kind of sitting there. To try and fuel Carol's backstory. And again, to be fair, they do still try to find a way to work Marvel into Carol's backstory, because that's kind of how it was in the comics. As in the comics, when she she was exposed to the bomb that bonded her that bonded cream genetic material into her own body, giving her abilities similar to Captain Marvel. But in the same, but the fact that they kind of fridged the original Captain Marvel in favor of Carol, I think is annoying. And this isn't me. And again, I wouldn't. Again, this is the only instance where I'll probably get angry about this, because even if they did want to keep Marvel a woman, which I don't have a major problem with, I would have at least liked that acknowledgement. Acknowledge that Marvel was at some point wearing a costume and fighting against the Kree Empire in a more active manner than just what this is. Actually being a superhero. And you don't have to say that Marvel had all these nifty little superpowers. You could have said that Marvel used weapons or fought against them, but still wearing the uniform, actually putting it on to defend people that the Kree were trying to subjugate. I think that would have been cool, or at least or even just like a wink and a nod here and there. Just saying that in her younger days, maybe she did wear a costume like the one Carol wears, and she did similar things to what Carol's trying to do right now. I would have liked that. Just some little acknowledgement about what Marvel is. And you can still make the argument, well, she is fighting against them by building the engine core to try and get the Skrulls away from them. And okay, fair enough, but I still would have liked some acknowledgement that she was Captain Marvel before Carol. And and honestly that did get to me when I watched this movie. I just feel like that they kind of pushed the Marvel aside in favor of Carol being the main character without even acknowledging what came before. Also, one more pet peeve, they never call Carol Captain Marvel in this movie at any point. It annoys me to no end, especially since in every other MCU movie we have gotten the hero has gotten a name. In Iron Man, he got his name in the newspaper. In Hulk, a bunch of teenagers called him that when he was rampaging. Thor, that's his name. Captain America, he got it from his little sideshow. The Avengers, that was the name of the initiative. Let's see. Guardians of the Galaxy, Ronan called him that mockingly. Ant-Man, that's what Hank was called originally, so the name got passed along to Scott. Doctor Strange, that's his real name, Dr. Stephen Strange. Spider-Man, it's the name he'd been going on with for a while, so of course he would actually keep it. And who else? Oh yeah, and Black Panther. That's the name of the warrior that fights for, that's the name of the king that fights for Wakanda and the outfit he wears. A Black Panther. But at no point in the movie did they call Carol Captain Marvel. And again, you can go with the fact that the original the name came from Marvel being butchered by our English language to Marvel. Marvel, which they do that joke in the movie where Fury says Marvel's name is Marvel, so I guess that's there. But at no point in the movie did they ever call her Captain Marvel. Not even as a joke. Which, I don't know. I didn't like that. I didn't like that. I just that just kind of annoyed me a little when that happened. It just annoyed me a little. I would have liked something, anything. I don't care. Just something that says, "Oh, hello, well then Captain Marvel." So like she says, "Well, look, Captain Marvel." Marvel. It's like, what? And then maybe jokingly pass the name on to her. I don't know. I would have liked some origin for the name, but no. I think the first time that we've ever heard her call Captain Marvel is on Spider-Man: Far From Home. Otherwise, I don't think we've ever heard her name. I don't think anyone's ever called her Captain Marvel in this movie. So yeah. But with all that said, I do still think this film is good to watch. Brie Larson, all the main actors are great, and Brie Larson I think does a great job, even if the material isn't, even if the character doesn't have much more work with. There is still some good pacing, and it is still nice seeing her rediscover her identity and the kind of the crises that come from that. There is still some fun action. There is still definitely some good mystery and some good pathos, as well. I am a little annoyed by the reveal with the Skrulls. It is still nice seeing them come together. The plot aside from the beginning does have some good pacing to it. There is some nice jokes here and there. While Carol's snark can be annoying at times, it could actually be funny, and I think it did help endear the character to you. There are some little minor things here and the action I think was great. I still love the final scene when Carol actually breaks the inhibitor chip and just goes nuts on everybody. That was fun and just great to watch. And I think that's the major thing with the movie. It's trying to be just a fun superhero movie. And while it does still have some factors that hold it back and keep it from being a great movie, it's still a ton of fun. Again, we got a main actress that's turning in that's trying to be as fun as possible with the role. We got a lot of good powerhouse actors that definitely do what they can. We got some good humor, great action, some good pace, some nice mystery with the character, and some good character moments here and there. While there are still some things about this film that do kind of get to me a little and hold it back, I still think Captain Marvel is a good movie. Not a great movie, but a decent one. All right. Hold on, buddy. I'm almost done. But so yeah, at the end of the day, I think Captain Marvel is all right. And if you don't like the movie, I can understand why. There are factors there. I can understand why, but for me personally, I think it's a lot of fun. Not a great film, but definitely one but definitely an all right one. One that I think I'll be glad to see again. So yeah, that's about all I have to say. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson. I have a dog that I really need to pay attention to now because he's kind of a dick. But next time we meet, it's time that we saw the conclusion of the battle with Thanos. So next time we meet, we're going to be taking a look at what is possibly 2019's biggest box office success with Avengers Endgame.